All right, everybody. Now, this is going to be a very, very interesting conversation. James and Joanne Moriarty are with us. And I actually met James at a little church in East Dallas in 2013. And Judith Very Baker was there. And I had not met Jim Mars in person. I'd only seen his photographs. And James was wearing a hat. And I was convinced he was Jim Mars. Then as time went by, I went, that's not Jim Mars. Can't be Jim Mars. So we spoke. And now it's my pleasure to bring him and Joanne on the program. Let me tell you a little bit about them. They are whistleblowers as eyewitnesses to the war crimes committed in Libya by Hillary Clinton. And it says here, please see attached treatment written for a Hollywood producer. I guess I could say this. After getting home, we were targeted by this government and soft kill blacklisted with a slash between kill and black. We are the official spokespersons for the tribes of Libya and have given actionable intelligence on the ground in Libya to the DIA, whose agent, Eric Maddox, was in our home many times. We've also had CIA and FBI in our home. CIA was brought into our home by Glenn Beck's production company, The Blaze. The CIA lady told us if we did not shut up about Libya, we would have no life, and at that point, they went public. They brought back from Libya 2 gigabytes of proof of the war crimes committed by Clinton and her NATO partners. They have proof that the Libyan war was started by a lie and was indeed a false flag. And they also know that Clinton and Obama have been supplying the terrorists in Libya with arms, money, and mercenaries since 2011. They stay in touch daily with the tribes of Libya. And so we're going to talk about NATO and Clinton's war crimes in Libya, the truth of the Libyan war, the truth about what happened to Chris Stevens, the truth about who's keeping Libya full of radical Islamic mercenaries, who is arming and funding them as official spokespersons for the tribes of Libya, who represent all the Libyan people. Joanne and James, welcome to Caravan to Midnight. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. It's our pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much.
You know, I want to say something else. I always do this. I do it to myself. I do it to other people because I want to know what I'm getting into. So I check the net, and I can't find anything that suggests that you are not the real deal. I just wanted you to know that.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, we're not media people. We're pretty good racehorses in the business world, used to be. And we had a very, very successful business in Libya. We've got a proprietary product that rejuvenates oil wells and cleans up pipelines and sludge pits and chicken fat. It's a great product. We've had tremendous success with it. And we looked at Libya as a new market, and we went there and actually booked about $5 billion worth of business for our products. And we moved all our production facilities from China to Libya, marketing and production, because we were so successful there. And we actually signed the last agreements in January of 2011, and I was there until the 8th of February 2011, and the false flag operation started about 10 days later. And we'd been all over Libya, and of course we were interested in seeing that conflict stop as soon as possible because we had just restarted our business there. And in April, I think it was, we were invited to go over and head an NGO fact-finding commission by a worldwide group of with over 1 billion members, the Youth for Peace. We agreed to do that because if anything we heard that was true that was going on in Libya, then we had made a commitment to move everything there, and it wasn't good. So we agreed to go as long as we were given unlimited access to any place we wanted to go. And we went over there the first time for 5 days. They asked us to stay and come back. We returned, and we were there trapped in Tripoli for over 100 days. We couldn't get back out. And during that period of time, we traveled. We saw all the war crimes being committed, and we kept trying to contact people here in the United States, our government officials and everything, tell them how wrong-footed they were, because the U.S. was actually supplying and arming and funding Muslim Brotherhood, Ansar al-Sharia, Al-Qaeda, all the bad guys. And in fact, other media from England were interviewing the rebels, if you would, and they were admitting that the week before they'd been in Afghanistan fighting the U.S., and now they were being funded by the U.S. in Libya. It was really a conflicted thing. We couldn't understand what was going on.
250,000 mercenaries were brought in to take over that country because the people in that country were happy. They didn't want a revolution. They didn't want to throw their government out. There were some discontented people, maybe about 6%. Most of those were radical Islamists, and they lived in exile. Most of them, some of them were in jail in Libya. Those are the Libyans that Hillary Clinton joined hands with and brought in the mercenaries to back them to take over that country.
Now, to let your audience know about Libya, Libya was, the people there were happy. They had the highest per capita salary in Africa at $15,800 a year. That's higher than India, higher than China. When you got married, you received a gift from the government of $46,000. Your first car cost you half a dealer invoice. Your home, and the government was building 620,000 new condominiums in Libya at that time. They were about 2,000 square foot to 2,700 square foot. Cost you 10% of your salary for 20 years, and it was yours. Gasoline was 44 cents a gallon. Your hospitalization was paid. And if you could not get the treatment you needed in Libya, if you go anywhere in the world to get treatment, the government not only paid your medical expenses, but paid for your travel and expenses and a family member to go with you. Education was fully paid. Again, if your brain was good enough and you wanted to study outside of Libya, they paid all your expenses and a stipend to live on. We knew a young man was getting his doctorate in England. He had a wife and 4 kids. His stipend was about 4,500 pounds a month. That was about $7,500 a month at that time. And nobody had any debt. The government had no debt. Libya had $241 billion in cash and cash equivalents in the Federal Reserve System. They had 150 billion euros. In the Euroclear system, they had about $38 billion in cash. In Libya, they had 179 tons of gold, 2,000 tons of silver, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the government used about 49%, I think it was, of their oil income to pay the government expenses. The rest of it was plowed back in to benefit the people. That was Libya. That's not what we heard. Everybody here heard something different.
The other thing that people don't know is that when Libya had its bloodless coup, when Gaddafi was put in charge at 1969, when they threw the Italians out, the Libyan average salary was 60 dinar a year, which is nothing. And Gaddafi came in and gave the land to the people that had been working it basically as slaves for the Italians. First time in the history of Libya, the Libyans got to own their own land. And from that time, when Libya in 1969 was the poorest, least developed country in Africa, between 1969 and when they threw Gaddafi out, well, actually he stepped down in 2006 when they signed the treaty with the United States to drop the embargo against them. That's when he actually stepped down.
That was one of the requirements of the treaty.
Yeah. Libya became the most developed country and the highest paid, and it had the best record for everything.
They were ranked number 1 in the world for prenatal and natal care. You know, these are things that nobody heard about. And when we went to Libya, the first trip in there was in January of 2007, shortly after the treaty was signed. And I made Joanne take a bushel basket full of headscarves and stuff because we didn't know what we were going to get into. And we had 4 great big gorillas as security people for us. And after 2 days, I sent the security people home. We were safer walking on the streets of Tripoli than we were in Houston. And Joanne didn't need her headscarves. You didn't see women running around in beekeeper outfits. We found out that Gaddafi didn't even like the women to cover themselves. That was a fashion statement for them, but they did not wear the hijab that covered their faces and everything, you know.
Well, Gaddafi hated radical Islam. He threw them all out of the country, and the women there in Libya were emancipated in the 70s by Gaddafi. They were doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, mothers, whatever they wanted to be. They were in the military. Most of Gaddafi's guards were women. So women were free there. They actually had maybe some more freedoms than we have here, I would say. They were really free in Libya and supported there to be free.
The government had food warehouses all over the country, and if you had made a bad business deal or whatever and you didn't have any money, you could go to any of those government warehouses without any ID or anything, and they would give you 50 kilos of rice and 50 kilos of flour and cheese and milk powder and enough money to have an animal slaughtered for your family. You could go back the next day. At their Christmas time, every person in Libya got a $500 or 500 dinar gift from the government. You got a gift at your birthday. People had a really good life. Nobody had any debt. In fact, the first time we went in there were no international banks. We planned to stay 3 or 4 days because we had business to do with the petroleum ministry in Egypt. And we were asked to stay longer because they were really interested in our product and our technology. And we stayed an extra 10 days. Since they had no banking of any kind, we had to get some additional cash. And their international bank at the time was Western Union. And we really liked that because that meant that the Zionist bankers, the bank robbers, the banksters, were not in Libya. So we looked at that as a real positive thing. Now, having said all that, that gives you the background of why we were in Libya and what we did. We were back there 17 times. We were there 30 days to 3 months at a time. We were all over Libya and got to know the people and the country real well. And it was a pleasant place to go and do business, not like what we'd heard. So when we were asked to go for that NGO, we agreed to do it. Of course, our business was primarily the intent. After that, when we saw the atrocities that were taking place, we had no choice but to try to get the word out and let the people of the world know what was really going on in Libya. UN and NATO affected 60,000 bombing sorties from March of 2011 until end of October 2011. That's more bombing raids than World War II combined. And all the bombs and all the weapons used were depleted uranium. And depleted uranium taints the land for 50,000 years. When we went into Libya, as we said, they were ranked number 1 for prenatal and natal care. There were very, very few deformities in Libya, and that's because they're really considered a naive country by the World Health Organization. They're not cross-contaminated because there was very, very little tourism there.
But they bombed power plants, they bombed water supplies, they bombed hospitals, they bombed hotels, they bombed schools, they bombed everything that they could think of to bomb. I mean,
Bombed the Great
war crime after war crime. They embargoed Tripoli because Tripoli was a stronghold for the Libyan people, the biggest city there, and 2 million people were against this. They embargoed water and medicine and food and gasoline to that city. Those are all war crimes. You can't embargo innocent people from their necessities of life.
Now, all military vehicles were diesel, so embargoing gasoline affected the innocents. And this premise that Hillary Clinton said that they were bombing the hell out of Libya to protect the women and children was absolutely bald-faced lie. They were bombing, as Joanne said, every civilian target they could. And when they bombed, Libya's hot. It's the Sahara Desert starts about 4 miles south of the Mediterranean, the huge desert there in Libya. And the rest of the time it's very hot, so they have to have their air conditioning systems to maintain any kind of standard of living. So when you knock out the power plants, you affect the standard of living for the civilians. And the power plants were blown up, and then the replacement parts were not allowed to be purchased. Here's another thing that happened. This is another proof positive that the Zionist banksters were in charge of this. Gaddafi had started the gold-backed currency for Africa, the African Bank, and it was a reality. All the Arab countries had signed up as members. Half of Africa had signed up as members. It was located in the Comore Islands. And a gold-backed currency with the continent of Africa to support it would have completely destroyed the toilet paper makers. They couldn't live with that. So the first week of this false revolution, the Zionist bankers, the Federal Reserve, Euroclear, etc., acknowledged the rebels as the legitimate Libyans and converted all the wealth of Libya to those guys. Now, the 240, about $500 billion, that's $1 billion in cash and cash equivalents in the Federal Reserve and in Euroclear disappeared. The cash in the banks in Libya disappeared. The gold disappeared. The silver disappeared. And so the rape of that country, the UN and NATO, instructed by Obama and Clinton, used the wealth of Libya to blow up the country. And one of the first effects was the no-fly zone, which was voted only to stop flights because supposedly Gaddafi and his troops were attacking the innocent people. It wasn't ever true. But they established a no-fly zone, and the U.S. pilots are the ones that established the no-fly zone. In 2.5 days, they said that the no-fly zone was 100% in effect, and the Libyans couldn't get a mosquito in the air. Yet the bombing continued nonstop. And when the no-fly zone was established, the next big event that happened is the United States, this is the United States, shipped in through Chris Stevens 20,000 shoulder-to-air rockets to Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood. 20,000. These were not rockets in the storehouse of Libyan weapons. These were shipped in, as many other weapons were shipped in through Libya and distributed out to Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, in Syria, etc. And it was so bad that the leaders of the countries around Libya were demanding that the United States stop this because it was like a sieve, and the presidents of Chad and Niger and Algeria and Tunisia, Sudan, etc., said, you've got to stop these weapons coming out of Libya because it's a danger to our governments. And so these kinds of activities were horrendous. And when we were there in this fact-finding commission, many times we would see that the Libyan army had confiscated weapons that were in the hands of these mercenaries that were U.S. made, and they were shipped via Qatar into Libya.
There were a lot of Blackwater on the ground there. There was CIA there. All the reporters, other than there were about 7 not mainstream reporters that were alternative media that were there. Terry Mason was there. A few of these other people were there reporting the truth. The rest of the media there, CNN, NBC, CBS, Sky News, all of them, they were all intelligence. They were all CIA. And that we have proof of because when the Rixos Hotel was locked down and the people were held there for 5 days at the end when NATO came in and blew up Libya.
When they attacked
Tripoli, when they brought their black helicopters in and mowed people down in the streets, 1,500 they killed in 1 hour and 5,000 they wounded. We watched them do that because they couldn't break Tripoli. Then they brought in all their mercenaries in the big ship from Benghazi, and they brought in all their mercenaries in their little Toyota trucks with the big anti-aircraft weapons on the back. But when all this was going on, in that Rixos Hotel, they were being held hostage because the Libyan people were so angry at the lies of the media that had destroyed their country. They wanted to kill them all. So they were being held there. The 7 people that were reporting the truth had to stay together because the CNN lady went up to Terry Mason, and we know this because we know him very well, and he told us when he got out, and she told him, she said, if I catch you alone, I'm going to cut your heart out and eat it. And he said, she told me that right to my face. So they were all CIA, whatever intelligence agency you want to pick or whatever country you want to pick, they were all working for the bankers, for the banksters.
They were all kept in the Rixos Hotel because the Libyan government knew that they were all bent. And we were in the coffee shop, real nice coffee shop one day, and we're sitting with our backs to one of the reporters. And one of the security people was in front of us, and we were asking him about these attacks that had been made on hotels and everything because they were pinpoint attacks. And we were listening to this person behind us. They had just been to one of the military camps, one of the Libyan army camps, and they were giving on their cell phone latitude and longitude coordinates to somebody, NATO. And I asked the doctor there, I said, do you hear this? And he said, yes. He said, we're real open. And he said, we trust in our God, and we know the truth, and our God will save us. Well, that's how innocent the Libyan people were. I told him, I said, doctor, when you've got this huge propaganda machine working against you, I said, you need to be doing some of that yourself. You need to be getting the truth out. You need to be defending. And he said, no, our faith and our God will save us. So that's what happened to Libya. They never, ever defended themselves in the media. because they thought that the truth would win out, and it didn't. And Joanne and I saw atrocities you cannot believe. They started the genocide of blacks in Libya the first week of this phony revolution. We saw mass graves.
They were open about it. There were articles in the paper about how they were going to cleanse Libya.
But we saw ourselves about a half a dozen mass graves. These pits were probably 30-foot wide, 50-foot long, full of black bodies. We saw half a dozen of them. The total count of those mass graves was about 128 in Libya. We took photos of that. We tried to get Farrakhan. We tried to get all the black leaders in the United States, Al Sharpton, all of them, to do something about this. None of them wanted to hear a thing about it. There was never any support against the genocide in Libya, and that was a real travesty, because before that, Libya was a colorblind country. About a third of the Libyan citizens were black, and they held first-class passports. There were 3 classes of passports in Libya. And in every family, you saw every shade from black to beige in all families. And that was one of the things we liked about Libya, because you did not have any kind of race conflict going on there. The
lie, if you remember, the lie that Gaddafi was bringing in black mercenaries from Africa to fight against the Libyan people was a lie, and this was their excuse for killing all these black people. This is what they used. It was a real atrocity. We were at Sarman when they blew up a compound full of a home of people with laser guided missiles, just a home of a man and his family, pregnant women, children. 15 people were killed. The cordite was still in the air. You could still smell it when we were there. We have pictures of the bomb. We have pictures of the ID number on the bomb. We know exactly.
It was U.S. made.
It was U.S. made weapons. It was Canada who was bombing, and it was a laser target on a family home. And the man who survived, a couple of them who survived, stood there with tears running down their eyes, begging us to go into the mortuary and take pictures of the dead children and the dead bodies, and put it out to the media, because he said no one will report this. And so we did it, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. In my report, I gave it to Press TV, and those pictures still go around, are all around the world, of that dead little baby and the other people who were killed in that bombing raid.
Now, Libya was not a perfect place. Libya had a real problem. There were a bunch of Khazarian mafia that claimed to have been Jews that moved into Misrata about 150 years ago. And they were thugs. They were absolute mafia. And they were the ones that would confront everybody aggressively. Libyans are the most non-confrontational people we've ever met in our lives. They won't fight about anything. Their tribal law is that, let's say you ran into my car. We would shake hands and forgive each other, and you would owe me a favor. And next year I said, my daughter's getting married. I want you to supply the food for the wedding. You would do that. And if you didn't do it, then your family was obliged to do it. And if your family didn't do it, then your tribe had to do it. And that was agreed to on the spot. And if we couldn't agree to that, then they would put both of us in jail and feed us gruel and camel's milk until we agreed to that. That was their justice system.
Well, they have an 8,000-year-old culture.
And so when the Misrata Mafia moved in there, they acted like they were Muslims. They built underground mosques, and actually they had underground weapons production facilities, because nobody in Libya had any weapons. One of the ranking ministers had a Chinese-made air rifle. That was the only weapon he had. So people in Libya did not have weapons, period. They didn't have any.
A Chinese-made air rifle.
Yeah. And
it wasn't very good.
It wasn't very good, and he used to shoot rabbits on his farm. But the Libyan people had no weapons. And the police were not armed. In a city the size of Tripoli, 2 million people, we saw 3 police. There were not any traffic lights. I mean, it was crazy.
It was much safer than Chicago or any place, or Houston, any place you can imagine. You could go out at night. Nobody would bother anybody.
But the problem was Misrata Mafia. Misrata was the only modern city in Libya, and that was the only port facility that would handle containers, and it would handle a 100,000-ton container, one a day. So not really a very big port. But all the goods and services, ingress and egress into Libya went through Misrata. And not only that, but the Misrata thugs got 60% of all the Libyan government contracts without bid or tender. And Libya was a real unique place because any contract that the government signed already had to have the money in the bank to pay for it before they could sign it. So anybody that signed a contract in Libya, it was gold because the money was already there. And what the Misrata Mafia did is they sublet these contracts to foreign builders and then would chisel them on payments. And there'd be change orders, and they wouldn't pay them for that. And so a lot of the major contracts, there were 150 projects abandoned in Libya by the foreign contractors owned by the Misrata Mafia. Then they would recontract them to another group and start the process over again. They were absolutely thieves. There was a building about 10 miles west of Tripoli, real nice 10-story building, separated from everything else. And we were going by, and I'd seen that building several times, and I said, "What is that building over there?" And our friend said, "Well, that's Alibaba's building." And I said, "Alibaba?" He said, "You know the story Alibaba and the thieves?" He said, "That's where the Alibaba and all the thieves live." And I said, "Who is that?" And he said, "Oh, that's the Misrata tribe." And so they did have a problem. And actually they had done a Bernie Madoff kind of a theft of Libya for a huge sum, billions of dollars. And some young, bright IT guys had found this, that the securities that these guys were delivering to Libya were phony. And so the Libyan government was about to take down the Misrata Mafia and confiscate all their assets, which included the biggest oil field service company in Libya, a lot of production companies, businesses all over. And mysteriously enough, that's who Hillary joined hands with to take down Libya. So, you know, the problem, first of all, was the African bank. That was the main reason Libya had to be taken down, because the Zionist bankers could not allow any upstart company or country like Libya to destroy their fiat banking system. Second, the United States wanted to affect AFRICOM, which is the military control of Africa. There were 7 countries in Africa that did not agree to it: Libya, South Africa, and 5 others. After Libya fell, of course, they immediately succumbed, and so did the rest of the countries. So AFRICOM became a reality for the U.S. The third reason was all the exploitation of all the African countries by the Europeans had been going on for hundreds of years. Every treaty that was ever signed with any country in Africa was never honored. There were never any payments made. There were bribes made to officials, but the treaties were not honored. And so Gaddafi was a big African Union guy. In fact, he was the first president of the African Union. And so after he retired or resigned as the leader of Libya, he formed a coalition and had started an action against all the European countries for the failed treaty agreements in Africa. And the lawsuit was up to about $7 trillion. It had been presented to World Court, and the attorney said that lawsuit had legs. In other words, it had a very high probability of winning. And of course, England and France and Italy, none of these guys had any money anyhow, so they could not afford to be obligated for $7 trillion. So this is another reason why they joined hands with Hillary, and Hillary is called the butcher of Libya by the Libyan people. So these other countries joined hands with her, and they didn't do it willingly. When Tripoli had been invaded by the mercenaries, our hotel, which was the Corinthia Hotel, real nice 6-star hotel, a few of the ambassadors moved to that hotel because that's the only hotel that had enough food stocks and power plants and everything to keep operating. And one of them was the plenipotentiary ambassador from South Africa. His name was H.E. Dangor. And we had tea with him a couple of times. And one day Joanne asked him, she said, "Why in the world did South Africa join hands
against Gaddafi?
You all had such good working relationships." He said, "We had no choice." He said, "Your Secretary of State showed up in our country and said if we didn't join hands with her against Libya, that we would have rebels in our backyard." he said it was like the woman had a closet full of rebels. She could drop down any place. Well, she did have. That was these Al Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood mercenaries that she could put any place she needed to.
Fomenting revolutions has been a long history for them to destabilize countries in the world, for the cabal, Zionists, whatever you want to call them.
You remember we'd had a long time friendly working relationship with Egypt. After Nasser fell, the next government there was friendly to the United States. Mubarak had been a real good friend of the U.S. forever. And he was overthrown, and put in his place was Muslim Brotherhood, a guy named Morsi. Morsi and Morsi's wife were 30-year friends of the Clintons and best friends with Barack Obama. So they installed next door to Libya the Muslim Brotherhood. And incidentally, while Morsi was there, Obama gave Morsi $8 billion to buy half the Sinai Peninsula so the Muslim Brotherhood would have a homeland. Those documents were found in his safe after he was overthrown by a popular uprising of the people of Egypt.
Hillary Clinton also gave leaders of Muslim Brotherhood through her embassy in Egypt during the time she was Secretary of State anywhere from $300,000 to $800,000 in cash to Muslim Brotherhood leaders. And there's proof of that reported by Dr. Jerome Corsi with the document we gave him where these leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood, the Islamic terrorist group Muslim Brotherhood, came in and signed for the money in the U.S. Embassy. And that was also found in Morsi's safe and was leaked out by the tribes to us. Those men were tried for treason in Egypt for taking money from a foreign country, and most of them are sentenced to death now.
5 of them sentenced to death, the rest of them life in prison without parole.
But how does the State Department explain, and how does Hillary Clinton explain? Because no one has ever asked her giving cash to Muslim Brotherhood.
$850,000 is a hell of a lot of money. And the reason our information is credible is that, as I said, we're not really political activists or anything. We became friendly with the tribes because we actually ended up signing contracts with them in Libya. We got to know all of them real well, and we treated them with respect. And
well, let me explain something. In Libya, everybody's a member of a tribe. The tribes go back 8,000 years, and most people identify each other by what tribe they're in. They know. Foreigners don't have a clue who's in what tribe. But in the Libyan government, which was a pure democracy, you had the People's House of Representatives, which were voted in, and then you had the General Secretariat of the tribes, 250 members representing every tribe, and they actually were the shadow government overseeing the People's House of Representatives. If they did anything against the people, they could veto people, they could have people thrown out of office. So they had two houses, and they had a direct democracy, or a republic, if you will. They had a direct one because the people in anybody's tribe could go to their tribal leaders, who they knew very well, and complain if something was wrong. And those tribal leaders could take it to the General Secretariat, who could take it to the government or do something themselves with it. And it's always been that way in Libya. So now they have no government. They have a failed state. They do have a House of Representatives that was elected, but it had to move to Tobruk because they were attacked by the Muslim Brotherhood, Ansar al-Sharia, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, whatever you want to call them, people that are puppet government trying to stay in power by Hillary Clinton. You also still have the General Secretariat of the tribes. It doesn't have a house there in Tobruk because it's dangerous for them, but they do know each other. They are in contact all the time, and they still make decisions for the country.
The tribes they asked us if we would please help them get the information about what was going on. And Dr. Jerome Corsi has written more than 40 articles on WorldNet Daily based on information we provided him. Many of the documents that have been provided to us have been read into the congressional records. And the information, before the tribes ever release anything to us, they always verify it 3 ways from Christmas. And so the information they provide us is always perfect. And we've had no fear at all about putting that forward because it's always been validated as being completely accurate. And to confirm how accurate it is, after we got back we were trapped in Libya, captured by Al Qaeda. 3 miracles got us out of there, and that's a whole story in itself. But when we got back to the United States, we did not realize it, but we had been soft killed and blacklisted. Within a few months, our bank accounts were taken, our credit facilities were killed. All our business partners would no longer talk to us. We were alienated, isolated, etc., and we didn't know why. But in 2011, no, not 2011, yeah, 2012 or 13, we cornered Pete Sessions. It was actually
2013.
It was actually Regina Imburgia that was a stalwart in helping us, and we cornered him at an event one night. It was a rainy night, not many people showed up, and Regina was like a bite and choke. She stayed after him until he agreed to talk to us. And so he sat down with us after he heard our story. He said, okay, I want to write this down. He took the next hour and a half writing down every detail that we gave him.
First he called Eric Maddox. He said, do you have the number of somebody who was in your home? And I said, yes, I do. And he said, would you call him, please? And so I called him and I said, he said, tell him that I'm going to call him in 15 minutes. So I told him that Pete Sessions would he answered the phone. I said, Congressman Pete Sessions would like to speak to you. He's going to call you in 15 minutes. And actually, Pete spoke to him and gave him his phone number. He said, you can check me out. Apparently, that's the way intelligence agencies do. He checked out to make sure it was Congressman Pete Sessions. And then he called back in 15 minutes. And so Pete went outside and talked to him. And he came back for about 20 minutes. He came back in and he said, okay, he's real. You're real. We need to talk. And so we sat there with him for, 2 hours? And fed him all
he
the
wrote down
information.
everything.
He wrote down the names of the people.
I'll be back to you in 10 days. And he was good to his word. He called us back. He said he had called in the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He said who is the top of the pecking order in intelligence agencies in this country. And he said the director was not happy coming to my office. General Flynn said people would come to my office. I don't go to theirs. But Pete Sessions is head of the Rules Committee, so he's a real ranking guy in Congress. And he said, I want you to know that the general confirmed everything you said was accurate. You had been blacklisted. You had been soft killed. You'd been alienated. They had ruined your business. He said they confirmed everything you said was completely accurate. And he said, then in addition to that, the general said, but the surprising thing is those 2 people can sit in the Woodlands, Texas, pick up their phone and call anywhere in North Africa and get actionable intelligence. Those people have gotten inside the tribes like no Western or foreign intelligence service has ever been able to do. He said, we don't know how they did it.
But he also
Pete said, then why have you made these 2 people? Why are you beating them up? Why didn't you make them your best friends? And of course, he had no legitimate answer for that. So we've been confirmed to be 100% accurate.
it was Obama who was stopping him from doing doing his job. That's why General Flynn quit. But
he was only there 2 years.
Yeah. He also confirmed that all of our intelligence, he said all the intelligence they brought forward, every single piece of it is 100% correct. So we know that the tribes vet everything before they give it to us. And they're on the ground everywhere. They're close to the tribes of Egypt. They're close to the tribes of Tunisia. They're close to the tribes of Iraq, the tribes of Saudi Arabia. In fact, we met the tribes of Saudi Arabia when we were there in 2011, who came in to support the tribes of Libya in their.
They're trying to get their country back. It's not a game with them, you know. And
well, tell them what happened to us there when we were there.
Okay, when we were trapped in Tripoli, could not get out. There was of course, no fly zone, so you couldn't fly in and out. So we had to go to the Tunisian border and come in by bus or car, whatever, into Tripoli, and that's a long drive. We had no sooner gotten into Tripoli than they started bombing and fighting on that road. Going the other way, east, took you to Benghazi, where all the mercenaries were being brought in constantly into through the east side. They were bringing them in through Egypt, etc. And so we were trapped inside of Tripoli, and really, except for the bombing, we didn't see much hand-to-hand fighting in Tripoli. It was, you could hear the bombs, but, well, that's a lie. A hotel 2 blocks from us got blown up.
They used the bombs as a terror. Yeah. They terrorized people. There were miscarriages every night, a huge amount of miscarriages. People dropped dead of heart attacks. Young people died of heart attacks from fear.
They started bombing at 2 o'clock and went till 6 every night.
Can we get back to against international law? All these are war crimes.
But in the end, after it was announced that the tribes of Libya had developed a new constitution to be voted on by every Libyan, including the bad guys. And we were sitting with Sheikh Ali, who was the supreme leader of all the tribes, one day in the hotel, and the new document was delivered to him. And he said, this is a new constitution. It's going to be voted on by everybody. And he said, this is what's been demanded by the U.S., UN, and NATO, that there be a constitution. So they had the constitution. Of course, you have to appreciate the fact that what the U.S. meant by having a new constitution was the ability for the U.S. to put in a puppet government in there. They didn't really want a constitution. They didn't want any democracy. They wanted a failed state that they owned. So here was this constitution. It was ready to be published. And of course, the invasion of Tripoli started the next day or 2 days later. And in the Corinthia Hotel, it sits right on the Mediterranean, and the port is less than a mile away. And from the 21st floor, we could see the port, and we could see a nonstop stream of these little Toyota pickup trucks with anti-aircraft guns mounted on them, flowing in nonstop all day. And they brought in, I don't know how many mercenaries they did, but the war for Tripoli lasted many days. And then in the end, when the Tripoli people were still resilient, off of the Mediterranean came in 3 Black Hawk helicopters with their guns blaring. We could see 2 of them. We could hear the 3rd one. They came in low off the Mediterranean and mowed down every man, woman, child.
Those cannons have a very distinctive sound.
There are many cannons. And they were killing everybody. They killed, how many people was it?
1,300
in the first hour.
13 or 1,500.
Wounded 5,000 and killed 1,300 in the first hour. And this went on for a long time, and they mowed down everybody in the streets in Tripoli. And
then NATO just handed Tripoli to these mercenaries. They went into stores and stole stuff. They went into people's houses. They raped women. They did whatever they want. They just handed the city to them.
And there was an effort made to take the remaining ambassadors and stuff to get them evacuated out of Tripoli. And we had made appeals to the U.S. government to try to help us. We never got a response ever.
But the Prime Minister of Malta
sent a rescue ship in, and the Russian ambassador, a guy named Maxim Maximov, we'd met him. He had actually come to our hotel to try to get contemporary information about what was going on, because he said the media is telling one story, and he said our people here are telling something else. And when we went to the Libyan government, they said, if you want to get the real information about what's going on, go talk to those 2 Americans in the Corinthia Hotel. So he called us. He came over, one of the security people, and he said, this is real strange. How do you all know the contemporary information? We said, well, we've got to know a lot of Libyans, and a lot of the soldiers, they go out and fight for 3 weeks, and then they're back for a week's leave. And we talk to them. We ask them what's going on, out in the field. So we had really good information all the time. And so he got to know us, and he invited us to the Russian embassy if we ever needed to have an adult drink sometime, because there was no alcohol in Libya. So he called us when the evacuation was taking place, and he said, I know you all have no support from your government, but he said, I've put your names on the list for evacuation by the
ship that was
Malta
being sent by the
rescue ship.
Malta Prime Minister.
And we thanked him for that, And then in the lobby at that time, there were a whole bunch of people that had come into that hotel, reporters and people, and a good, tall, blonde-headed, good-looking guy. He had a German accent. And he said, "Are you Americans?" And we said, "Yes." And he said, "Are you planning to get out here?" And we said, "Yeah." And he said, "Can I go with you?" Well, his name was Anthony Hay. He was the FIFA coach for the Libyan soccer team. He was from Germany. So he attached himself to us. And then Walter Fauntleroy, who was a black congressman, ex-congressman, started the Black Caucus in the United States. He was trapped in Tripoli. We had the sister of the president of Mauritania. She became part of our group. We had a Bahraini prince, and his ne'er-do-well friend from the United States, who was actually
trying to sell guns.
He was trying to sell guns and stuff to the Libyans. He was supposedly a Boy Scout coach and a friend of the Bushes, but he was there. So, and one girl that worked at the hotel. So we had 7 people in our entourage. The hotel agreed to let us use their van. She put one of her trusted drivers and another hotel employee had shotgun to drive us to the port. And not to the port, we were trying to find the rescue ship, and we were told by the secretary of the president of Malta where the ship was. And so we had to drive 40 miles east, and every 100 yards there were barricades and Al-Qaeda thugs with AK-47s that stopped and
Checkpoints.
checked every car. And so what the drivers were instructed to do by the hotel operator is, when you get to a checkpoint, tell them these are reporters, because all the bad guys knew that the reporters were on their side, so they'd Allah Akbar and shoot up in the air and shoot down on the ground. One guy got a little too close, and a bullet ricocheted off the ground and knocked the back window out of the van. And but we drove all the way down to where this boat was supposed to be. No boat. It was not visible. And we went back into the harbor and back down. And the second time down, we went into this little village, and it was real scary because the village leaders picked us up, drove us down in an alleyway. You couldn't get the doors open, and it ended up at a mosque, and where all the nasty things that were done by the CIA operatives were done in mosques. That's where they would bring in the young girls and rape them. They'd bring in the men, they chop them up, cook them sometimes. They would introduce young men to alcohol and drugs and everything and Viagra, and then they'd send them back out to do their nasty work. And so when we pulled up this mosque, we thought this is the end of it, you know. But they were very, very nice people. They were
actual Libyan
really
people.
nice people.
They were not the mercenaries.
And they took us back to where this boat was supposed to be. And we went back there. It was kind of a fishing club. And we went back there, and there was no boat. We're talking on a ship-to-shore phone.
We had a satellite phone.
To the Malta
one of the guys with our
secretary, and she was telling us where the boat was. Well, it was 100 yards from us. What they forgot to tell us, it was two tugboats with their lights out, because when the ship had tried to come into the Tripoli port, it was fired on by the mercenaries, and it had to go back out. It was moored 3 miles out away from Tripoli, and so there was two tugboats there ready to take us out, but they had their lights off because they were in fear. So we went all the way back into the harbor, into the port a second time, and that second time we pulled in there, and we were held in there over an hour. And in the end, all these little trucks came boiling in there. All these young men jumped out of the trucks. We all had AK-47s all over, pointed at us, 30 or 40 of them. And the old guy, real hard-looking case, he had a list with our names on it. He said, we know who you are, your game's up. And he said, we're taking you with us. So they took us then to their torture center, which was the Mahari Hotel.
The Radisson Blu.
Yeah. And we were held in the bottom floor of the Mahari. There was no lights or electricity. They only had the emergency system working, and they had the elevators working. And while we were there a long, long time, they would drag in these wounded soldiers, put them on the elevator, take them up to the mezzanine floor, and they were torturing them up there. We heard the most ungodly noises coming out of those men. Later on, there were 68 dead bodies found in there, but they kept us there forever. And as the night went on into the next day, people would come in, and then they would parade in front of us, and we were some prizes for them, And finally, after a long time, this big, fat, tall, bald imam came in wearing a dress, And he came in, he looked down his nose at all of us. And
we don't know what he said. He
said in Arabic something to one of his aides, and then he went off. And then the people that spoke Arabic got real nervous. That was the Sheikh from Bahrain and Fatima too from Mauritania. They got real nervous, and I've got a real strong personality. I was demanding that they give us back our passports and let us go. And we were American citizens. We were American citizens. America had been helping them. The United States had been helping them. We needed to leave. And there was no reason for them to be holding us. We were not combatants, or anything. And they finally agreed to let us go. But about that time, a young man from the Corinthia Hotel came over and sent the other driver and associate driver back. And he pulled Joanne over the side. Now, this was... Go ahead.
Okay, what happened was Imad came, and Imad was head of IT in the Corinthia Hotel. He was kind of standoffish. He never talked to anybody, but he knew us. Well, he came over and traded places with the regular driver. He said, this van, we wanted to go to the rescue ship. He said, this van is not going to the rescue ship. It's going back to the hotel. So Jimmy got very upset. He was very angry, raised his voice, and he was saying, we're going to the rescue ship. We're not staying in this country anymore. And Imad pulled me off to the side because he could see that Jimmy wasn't going to listen to him. So he said, what your husband did not understand was that Imam, what he said, when he came in here and looked at you, he said, when they go to the rescue ship, there's a kill zone set up 2 blocks down there. They are to be killed, chopped up, and burned, and it will be blamed on Gaddafi. So if we go that way, none of us are going to survive, and we're not going that way. We're going back to the hotel. So I went and grabbed Jimmy. I said, you need to listen to what Imad is saying before you decide we have to go back to the rescue ship. So everything changed at that point.
Yeah, he told me, he said, I think I can go by the back roads and get us back to the Corinthia Hotel. Now, the Corinthia is where we'd started out 2 days before that, you know. And he said, at least from there you can try to get out. But he said, I've gotten to know you and your wife. You're good people. You've just been trying to help Libya. But he said, I shouldn't do this. It's very dangerous for me. But he said, I'm going to help you. And so we, of course, agreed to do that. And he said, now there's another problem. He said, the men that are down there that are to kill you, he said, they're to be paid $2,500 to kill each one of you and another $1,000 to chop you up and burn you. And he said, we have to pay them. Otherwise, they won't keep their mouth shut. Joanne and I were the only ones with any money. We had $16,800 left.
I think it was 19,000.
Was it?
Yeah, it was 19.
19. And that was a little more money than they would have been paid. So we gave that to him. He went down and negotiated with them. So they all disappeared. He took us back to the hotel. So there was no way that the bad guys would know we had not had an untimely demise. That was the first miracle. Then when we got back to the hotel, the next day, Fatima too, one of her friends was an Al-Qaeda also, but he was running. He wasn't a bad Al-Qaeda. He was there to keep his neck his head connected to his body. And he ran the rescue ship that was taking refugees back to Benghazi. And he came up to our room and he said, look, there's nobody in Benghazi. All of them are over here killing people in Tripoli.
And he said, UN IOM ship.
He said, I can get you on the ship. I can guarantee to get you to Benghazi. And instead of taking you to the refugee camp on the Egyptian border where they're looking for you, he said, I'm going to have you offloaded and taken to a nice hotel there in Benghazi. And then you'll have to try to work your way out of there. But there's supposedly a U.S. office in that hotel. So we agreed to do that. He was good to his word. He got us he took us in his van all the way to the boat, got us inside the boat. And then we had 2 days of the most horrendous trip you've ever seen. It was hot. There was no air conditioning. There were two toilets, bathrooms for the whole crew. People were seasick. There was no food. They had out-of-date juice that when you drank it, you immediately were doing the green apple quick step. They had moldy bread.
They basically had no food.
No food.
No food and nothing.
And so people were hanging off the deck. It was just a mess. Real rough seas. It was in the height of the winter. This is in late August. And we got to Benghazi, and sure enough, good to their word, they took everybody else to Egypt. And they took us in a separate van to the Tabisi Hotel there in Benghazi. And when we went inside, the concierge looked at us and knew that we were not the typical kind of Al-Qaeda rebels that they had normally been dealing with. And Joanne and I split off to go try to go up to the U.S. consulate office in that hotel. And while we're doing that, the concierge is trying to call in some official to try to address these poor starving people that had just come in. And we went up to the U.S. office in that hotel. The guy barely spoke in English. He said there was nothing he could do to help us. He was there to help the rebels. He was not there to help any
U.S.
American.
citizens. Yeah.
And I said, but, we're U.S. citizens. He said, no, I can't do anything with you. So we went downstairs. The next place we tried was the
EU.
European Union had an office. Very nice guy there. He said, gosh, I wish I could help you, but none of your European Union, we can't help you. When we got back downstairs, actually the number 3 guy in the puppet government
The NTC.
NTC was in Benghazi. Well-dressed, well-spoken guy. He sent in his security man first, and then he came in afterwards. And really nice guy, and he talked to us a little bit, and he said, I need to help you get out of Benghazi. He said, it's Ramadan. I must go break the fast with my family. But he said, I'm going to invite you to the buffet here in the hotel that will start after the sun goes down. And he said that I'm going to leave my security man here to take you back to try to get you on the plane tonight to go to Tunisia. And so
the reason we weren't caught was because there was no communication between Tripoli and Benghazi. Because of the war going on in Tripoli, all the communications were down. We were on a list to be captured, but because
they were looking for us at the
they were looking for
camp
us
on the border.
Yeah, they were going to take us to the camp, but we never got there because the UN guys helped us to stay in Benghazi.
So we had our first meal in 4 days. That day in the hotel, his security man was with us. He said it would mainly be wounded soldiers. It wasn't. It was mainly
on the plane.
On the plane. It was an old raggedy ass, worn out 727. When you look down between your feet, you could see daylight. The thing rattled and rolled.
Well, there was no lights on the runway. There was nothing. We waited till 2 a.m. before the plane took off. And then we just all walked out there and got on it and just took off in the dark. And he said no lights because they have to fly low. They don't want to get shot down. That's what the captain or whoever's flying the plane.
And there were 3 or 4 guys, really buff looking guys, that were sitting up ahead of us, and the Bahraini prince, he said those guys are
Qatar.
From Qatar, and he said they're not top rank, they're middle rank, they're like majors and stuff like that. He said I can tell from their accent. And when we landed in Tunisia, the first thing that came out of the chute were these metal framed, real heavy metal framed, big caster,
like footlockers.
Yeah. Except just the frame,
yeah.
The base. And they set those things down. And then the next thing that came out was a reinforced metal box, like a foot locker, that was about 2 foot by 18 inches by 18 inches. It took 4 of them to lift it off and put it on this roller. And then the next one that came down the chute had a hole inside of it where it looked like a forklift had driven into it to try to lift it up. And when they went to take it off the belt, they tipped it sideways, and some gold buttons fell out. Well, obviously what they had done, they melted down the gold bars and poured them into a cupola, the little cup, and made these gold buttons so they would lose all the hallmarking on the gold. So these 4 guys had these 2 boxes full of precious metal that they were taking back to Qatar. So that was probably their payoff. Qatar, yeah. We were witness to a lot of things, that was really unusual. But, those 3 miracles really, there's no way that Al-Qaeda will ever help anybody, because you look cross-eyed at any of them, they slit your throat, you're gone. And so for 3 Al-Qaeda people to actually help us was a real act of God. And when we got to Tunisia, U.S. government absolutely would not help us at all. They wouldn't help us arrange flight back to the United States unless somebody over here put forward about $5,000 to $10,000 a piece to try to get us back. And anyhow, we got back to Houston.
When we arrived at Houston, you were taken. Jimmy was taken by the FBI for 3 hours, but I had all the information on me on a hard drive that I had. 200
gigabytes.
Yeah, I had it secreted on me, and they never looked at me. The Al-Qaeda never searched me there either. They don't like to touch women. So when I got back, I was down in the baggage department waiting for him while he was being interrogated by the FBI for 3 hours. And the CIA lady that came into our house said we were targeted there. That's where they tagged us.
Now, when we finally got back to Houston, we of course were trying to restart our business because everything in Libya was lost. We lost $200 million worth of equipment. All the money in the bank was taken. All our feedstocks were gone. So we basically had to start our business over, but we'd been phenomenally successful. So that should have been no problem, except for the intervention of the bad guys. And we couldn't get anything started. So we were selling off our property, sold off our car collection, antique car collection, selling off everything, giving stipends to our scientists and engineers because it wasn't their fault that we went to Libya, because obviously we would start our business over. It didn't happen, and it didn't happen, and we couldn't figure out why. And in the meantime, the Libyans start sending us information, and Joanne is calling every single politician in Washington, D.C., all the Texas politicians, Oklahoma, everybody we could try to let them know how wrong-footed we were in Libya. And nobody wanted to listen to us. And finally, Joanne was successful in getting through to Michelle Bachmann's aide.
Tara Dahl.
Tara Dahl was her name, and she turned out to be CIA, but we didn't know it at the time. And after we talked to her, things started to hot up.
She introduced us to a man that worked for the FBI, Tim Hunt. He was on loan to the FBI Terrorist Task Force Group. And he
was actually a detective from the Oakland area.
Yeah, very nice man. And he said, "You haven't been debriefed." I said, "Why would I need to be debriefed?" He said, "Because you were held by Al-Qaeda. Everybody has to be debriefed that's been held by Al-Qaeda." He said, "I need to call the DIA." And that's how Eric Maddox, who identified himself as Kevin Davis, which was his phony name, when he came into our house. And he was very nice to us. Eric came to our house a number of times. He gave us a test that was written by the DIA to see if we really knew the tribes, 11 questions for the tribes, and they answered them in 24 hours. They were shocked. They thought it would take us weeks to get it. They also gave them a map of where all the tribes were in Libya. Nobody can get that information. So they were shocked. After Eric Maddox was in our house a number of times, he brought in some FBI people. He was frustrated because he couldn't get any of the intelligence we were giving to him to move upstream. And he said, "I'm told it goes to the very top and it's being thrown in the trash."
Now, what he told us was the agenda in the United States was being set by Muslim Brotherhood. Next, every single document in Arabic was translated by Muslim Brotherhood and then delivered to the U.S. government.
Intelligence agencies.
And I said, "How can that be?" He said, "Because they're inside at the highest levels in the United States." This was the head interrogator for the DIA told us that. And after some weeks, whenever nothing was happening with the information we're providing him, positive, for example, the tribes gave us the latitude and longitude of a huge new training center that the CIA had built in the Derna area. And they were bringing in recruits from all over the world and training them there to be psychopathic head choppers. And they had all kinds of weapons training and everything, a huge camp. And it was really secret. Nobody had ever been given that information about that camp except us. And so we passed it on through Eric, and it went upstream to Washington, D.C., and in 2 days, they started evacuating that camp. They were told to sell everything they couldn't take with them, and they were evacuating the entire camp. And the leaders from that camp went all the way across Libya and went into the southern part of the Tunisian border.
Algeria. They went into Algeria. They went across the desert. The Libyans had placed inside a couple different tribal members that were colonels in the military, and they were calling from the desert. Every time they stopped, they were given locations where they were. And, it was pretty, even to Eric, when he came back, he was very disappointed. He said, it's a mistake, He
said, same thing we did in Iraq. We're doing here. And so when I said, well, if you're not going to do anything, you're damaging the intelligence we're giving. We were giving them where the Al-Qaeda leaders were spending the night. We were giving them latitude and longitude where the weapons stores were, where their underground bunkers were.
The Libyan tribes knew that we had been soft killed and blacklisted. They knew all our finances were taken from us. And they told us, they said, the information we're giving you, they pay over here in this area. They pay lots of money for this information. They ask us all the time. They come on the streets, the CIA, all of them, they try to ask us for information for this intel. We don't give it to them, but they offer to pay $25,000, $50,000, whatever we want. They'll pay for the information. So he said, you make them pay you for the information. Of course, we were told, well, they never pay for information. Where do we hear that? So the next thing that happened,
with nothing.
We have all this information, all this proof on our computer of all these atrocities and how it was started as a false flag. Because one of the people who survived that false flag, we have one of the only interviews with him. So Tara Dahl was making an attempt to get that information through via various channels. And the one she set up the next was a guy named Joe Weasel, who was the head for the Blaze
Production company for Glenn Beck.
Beck's production company. And she said, they heard about your story, would like to do a 2-hour documentary on you. Would you speak to Joe Weasel? And I said, sure. And she said, I'll be on the phone with you to introduce you. She wasn't. That was a lie, but that's okay. Joe Weasel was nice enough. And he said, you realize, don't you, you're more in trouble in this country from this government than you were when you were in the hands of Al-Qaeda. And I said, well, I didn't realize that at that time. But he said, we would like to come in and do an interview with you. And first we're going to come in and do a pre-interview, and then we're going to do the documentary, and Glenn's going to have you on his show and all kinds of stuff. So we said, sure. It was set up for a week, and then he called back and he said, we'd like to come in 2 days. Well, they showed up in 2 days, 3 from the Blaze and 1 lady. He said, we brought a lady for your security. And she was CIA. Her name was Nikki Baracol.
We didn't know she was CIA.
We didn't at the time. We found that out later. But they listened to our story. They taped our story for 6 hours. I gave them some documents. I didn't give them any of the private documents.
They were trying to get the entire body, 200 gigabytes.
Yeah, they didn't get it. They got about 25 megabytes. But when they left, they said they would be back. This was a Monday. They said, we'll be back on Thursday to do the filming. Well, Wednesday night rolled around and I hadn't heard from them. So I called. I had the number for Mr. Weasel, and I called him. He didn't answer. But about 5 minutes later, I got a call from Nikki Baracol, and she said, this is Nikki. She said, I'm in charge of this project. She said, and I have canceled it. She said, if you all want to have a life, you need to forget about Libya.
She said, you need to continue to provide the intelligence agencies with all the information you get. And she said, you need to forget about Libya, and you need to start your life over, or you won't have a life. And I said, that sounds like a threat. She raised her voice. She said, you stand down and do exactly what I'm telling you to do, or you won't have a life. And that's when the next day we started going public.
We went public at that point.
And, it was, we had after
Power
that.
Hour was our first public, second public show that we went on.
Why all this interest from the Blaze? Because I heard about some CIA guy that was, I want to say he was CIA from 05 to 07 named Bunk or something.
Yeah, but he's been compromised. We were told that. Jerome Corsi told us that
what he said,
he was
Dr. Corsi said, be very careful with Glenn Beck. He's been compromised. That's what my sources
but what's the big attraction? Why Glenn Beck? I didn't know that he was that high profile.
It's because Glenn Beck it would make sense that he'd want to do a documentary on us.
Okay, gotcha.
And then they could ask for all of our information.
Yeah, but what's CIA doing with Glenn Beck's outfit as far back as 05?
Because he's a pawn.
Oh, gotcha. I just wanted to hear you say it.
Yes, once you get to a certain level of money, I think that CIA comes in and tells you work for us, or we take your money.
He's been compromised. They do that. They compromise everybody. They tried to compromise us. Listen, we became homeless. You can't imagine how devastated you become when all your bank accounts are wiped out. Your credit facility,
your attorney quits because he tells you basically you're at such a high level, it's dangerous for him, and you are under basically house arrest in this country. You should go talk to the Russian embassy and ask them if they'll take you in for asylum.
And when you're not having trouble paying bills, and all of a sudden we've done everything we thought was right, and then it's all gone. I mean, all gone. We were barefooted and hungry. We didn't realize what shape we were in, but I mean, we sold the last house we had and rented it. I mean, and with the agreement that we could rent it and leave everything in there. And we were paying a higher rent for it, but that way we didn't have to move our stuff. Within a month of us selling with the rental agreement, the buyer hires a company that manages leases, and they immediately give us a letter that if we're late on the rent past 3 days, then they're having us evacuated, having us evicted, and the sheriff will confiscate everything. They'd already had the court order done. That's illegal. But when you've lost your attorney, you don't have the ability to defend yourself. What do? You lose everything, because that was obviously the intent. We had no income, no way to get a job, couldn't maintain any income. I had 3 job offers, all of them were pulled. And these were, you just don't know what's happening. You cannot imagine that your own government is going to do this to you. We've been good, God-fearing, tax-paying people. And so this was such a devastating thing that happened to us.
The problem is you can't erase your eyewitness, unless you agree to and even if you agree to shut up, they can't. There's no guarantee you will shut up. People always say, well, why don't you just tell them? You just won't say anything. And I said, well, if you were the witness to a mafia crime, and you told the mafia, I'm sorry, I saw that, but I won't tell anybody, you think they'd let you go?
Yeah, but besides that, let me tell you, if you see the atrocities that we saw, and you keep your mouth shut, then you're as guilty of the guy pulling the trigger on the bomb.
Absolutely.
So we just could not do that.
Listen, what they did to those young girls, there was no rape by any Libyan men ever. They were done by the mercenaries there or the radicals there, and what they did to those young girls is just beyond imaginable. Some people in Misrata came home and found their young children chopped up and put in their refrigerators when they opened their refrigerator. I mean, they just had. You can't imagine. I don't know who thinks of these horrible
Like
things.
how young are we talking here?
3, 4s.
Whoa.
15, 18, all ages.
Young girls, 14 years old, taken off the street, raped, and their breasts cut off and written nasty words on the street in
Jesus.
Arabic with their breasts. Horrible. You can't even. It's worse than a nightmare. I don't
And
know.
where are they getting their money to operate from? Or operate on, rather?
$500 billion of Libyan money, and it probably went into the Clinton Foundation. These are CIA type activities, and as we've learned since we got our eyes pried open, that these are the same kinds of activities that they're doing in Syria. They did it in the Sudan. They did it in the Ukraine. They've done it in Kosovo. These are the activities.
One of the reporters that I think it was a Russian reporter that we sat with and talked to. He said, anytime you see a head chopped off or bodies cut up, it's CIA. He said that is a form of psyops that causes fear in people, so they'll do anything you want them to if they see those types of things.
Now, in Libya, this is after they were invading Tripoli. Right outside our window, we saw one man in a military outfit. There were two of them. They were on one. There was a kind of a retaining wall around the Mediterranean seawall, and they were fighting about 20 or so mercenaries. They jumped over the wall, and one of them started traversing the wall this way, right in front of our hotel, and we could see him. And when he got a couple hundred yards over here, he took off his tunic, pulled out. He had on a white shirt, we thought, underneath. Pulled it out. It was a long dasha, and he put on his cap, dropped his gun. He started walking this way where the Mediterranean kind of curved. He was walking out towards the Mediterranean. When they saw him, they shot him. And then a bunch of them went over there and they started chopping him up. They chopped his head off. They chopped his arm off. They chopped his other arm off, chopped off one leg. And then they were chopping off the other leg, but I guess their big blade had gotten dull and they couldn't do it. And they saw me watching all this, and we were filming it, and they took a shot at me. And I've got a picture. The bullet came right here, went through the double pane glass and wedged in the second layer of glass. We were up about 21 stories, and it hit right here. So, they didn't want us doing that, obviously. The next morning, there were a line of how many heads up there? Probably 30 or 40 heads lined up behind this body. They left that body out there. And there were heads lined up all the way along behind him. These kind of things they did, and it was horrendous. Believe me, I mean, it was terrible to see our own helicopters flying in with their mini cannons mowing down everybody in the street. That can't happen. That's not what we are as a people.
But Libya is the Achilles heel, I believe, of the banksters, of all of them, because it's the worst war crime they've ever committed openly, because they had an open gambit there. They just had the Libyan people were not able to protect themselves, so they just went in and did whatever. They uncloaked themselves as who the nasty people they are.
We've had 4 intelligence agencies threaten to kill us if we didn't shut up. And of course, the thing that we know for a fact is if they take us out today, we're in a better place tomorrow. There's absolutely no question in our mind and our hearts about that. They don't understand that mentality and that level of faith.
Can you say which agencies these were?
Sure. FBI twice, CIA, and DIA.
2 different divisions of the FBI.
And you can look at our website and on our DVD. We've been supporting ourselves with a little DVD we sell. And in that, we name names and dates and everything, you know. But they've done things to us to let us know just how what they can do. We think the reason we're alive is that we are the only source of information about what the tribes in Libya are doing or going to do, because they obviously monitor everything we do. And that's the reason we're alive. And they've done really
We're an
nasty,
asset,
yeah,
really.
they've done nasty things to us. We're homeless, and an old couple, an 80-year-old couple out of Dallas, let us live in this little rundown lake house in the deep southeast Texas. And there is a night light, a security light outside. It's a dusk to dawn light. And twice they'd come in and shot that light out. And they shoot it out. They stand at the bottom of the light and shoot up, because you can see the bullet hole goes up through the light. And that's right outside our door where we come in and out. So they let us know that they can come down and touch us. We're on a dirt road. It's a mile from where we are to where you hit the hard surface road. One day, this was about 2 years ago, we pull out on the hard surface road. 2 black SUVs stop us. They put Joanne in one car, me in the other. They drove for an hour and a half. They went into a parking building, then took us up elevators and took us into interrogation rooms where there was a metal table, metal chairs, bright lights facing towards us. We were kept for a total of 31 and a half hours before they brought us back. During that time, they never would give us ID, wouldn't give us their name. They said they didn't have to. They told us they could pick us up anytime they wanted. They could make us disappear. Nobody would know about it. And they want to let us know that they could do that anytime they wanted. We think they took this much time because obviously they had all our keys and everything. They went through all our computers and everything in the house, trying to find out what information they could glean that we hadn't given them. You know, we were told never, if we were ever put in that position, never drink anything. Don't go to the bathroom if you can keep from it, because they might have some kind of toxic chemical on the handle or whatever.
They planted drugs on us that they couldn't find. We also, when we first cut our DVD, when we made it, when we ordered it, the first order came in early, and luckily we checked it because all of them had our face on it, but all of them were hardcore pornography, every single one of them.
We called the active group in Dallas, Regina's group, and we told them, we said, my gosh, the DVDs came in. They came in early, and I said it was all porno on our cover, and 2 of the people in her group said, yeah, we've been arrested for distributing pornography without a license. Same thing happened to us, except when the delivery was made, the officers were right behind arresting us, and they delivered to us in a remote area of Northern California early. And when we tried to turn those over to a police officer that we knew there, she said, no, don't give them to us. She said, it'll end up biting you. She said you need to destroy them. And I said, well, one of those companies that destroys. She said, no, you're not guaranteed they're going to be destroyed. You need to see them destroyed.
Yeah, but you can talk about Chris Stevens for just a minute.
So
we were given information that there was going to be an attack on U.S. properties in Libya 6 weeks before Chris Stevens was killed. We tried to I do most of the speaking to the Libyans just because I don't have a Texas accent. They don't understand Jimmy. He'll talk for 10 minutes and they look at me and say, what did he say? So I do most of the speaking to the Libyans. And they told us, they put a colonel on. He was out in the desert. He said, I want to tell you this. It's important you tell your government there's going to be an attack on 9/11 on U.S. properties in foreign countries. And we tried to tell them. No one would listen.
This is about 6 weeks before.
But we brought forward the security report that said Morsi, the tribes gave it to us. It was a Libyan security report, said Morsi was the one out of Egypt who trained and armed and funded this attack on Chris Stevens. And of course, Morsi is Hillary Clinton's best friend, Muslim Brotherhood. And it's very obvious to the Libyans and to us, and it's a long story. We don't have time to tell you all this, John, but it was an assassination because dead men tell no tales.
This goes back to the 20,000 rockets that Chris Stevens had delivered to the bad guys in March of 2011. And the governments of the world wanted those back. They wanted the U.S. to reclaim them. So that night he had a dinner meeting with the ambassador from Turkey. We know what was discussed in that meeting because the man that was serving them was one of the tribe spies, a guy from the Sudan, and they didn't think he spoke English. His English is very good. And the discussion at that dinner was Chris Stevens was imploring with the Turkish ambassador for Erdogan to use his influence to get these rockets back, and they would pay whatever price the mercenaries, the Al-Qaeda Muslim Brotherhood, wanted to return them. This is 20,000 of those rockets, and he was told by the Turkish ambassador, not going to do it. The Turkish ambassador then left the building, was taken in a fast car to the airport and flown by military aircraft back to Turkey. When he sat down in Turkey, that's when the attack started on the compound. And the compound was protected by Ansar al-Sharia, which is a radical Islam group, paid by the State Department to protect this safe house, which was really never a compound. I mean, never a consulate. It never had a U.S. flag. None of the vehicles there had government tags or diplomatic tags.
There's no U.S. flag that flew there.
And so it was a safe house only.
It was a CIA house.
And always there were 20 or 30 guards around this place, and it was walled mansion. That day there were 2 or 3. And the man that lived right across the street from that mansion, also a very large house, was the son of one of the tribal leaders. And he was at the equivalent of a 7-Eleven store just a few blocks around this side getting milk and water for his family. When he first heard the first shots, he jumped in his car and was back at his house in less than a minute. And of course, they have a big metal double door. He pulled his car in there and closed it, and then went out through the human door. There were 2 thugs standing outside his gate. He walked out there and he said, "Well, are you here to kill us?" And he said, "No, we're not here to kill Libyans tonight. We're here to kill Americans." And he said he stayed there to continue to talk with them.
Actually, he did an interview on the Power Hour. This young man did, and it's all documented and recorded on the Power Hour. He has since disappeared to save his life.
His family.
To save his life.
But he told about what he saw, and he said, "I stayed down and talked with these 2 men because, first of all, they did not have Libyan accents. They had real strange names, and their clothes were not Libyan." And he said, if you don't act friendly to these guys, he said, they're liable to shoot you just offhand. And he said, I stayed with them while all this fighting is going on. Rockets are hitting this place is burning up. And then when the fire went out, he said, come on, go in with us. Let's see what's inside. And he didn't want to do it, but he said, I had no choice. And so he was one of the first group that went inside that building afterwards. And he said when he got inside, completely dark, it's night, no lights.
Looters had been there already.
Looters were there. And he said there was a body that they were kicking, urinating on it, abusing it and everything in the dark. And he said they when they drug it outside, he said that's when he saw that was Chris Stevens. He was already dead at that time. And the Mufti called Joanne.
Yeah, Faraj called me and he said when it was going on, they called. He said, do you realize your embassy is being, this was at, I don't remember.
The Benghazi.
Yeah, but
the embassy also in Tripoli.
Yeah, but the Benghazi compound was being. He said your ambassador has been attacked. The men who did it are in this hospital. And he gave me the name of it. He said they ran off. They're hiding in this hospital in Benghazi. You need to tell your people they can find those men here. I had no one to tell, so I tried to call everybody I knew, but nobody answered. It's in intelligence people that I knew go take a weekend off. I guess they go off at 5 o'clock. You can't talk to them. So maybe 2 hours went by and he said, okay, they've now left. He called back on Skype and he said, they've left the hospital now. They've shaved off their beards. They're in Western clothes and they're all headed towards Cairo. They're going to the Egyptian border.
In these SUVs.
And he named the SUVs and he said, they can see it. They can see this caravan. And he named the cars. He said, if they fly, they can find it. These cars going to Egypt, they'll find these men that killed your ambassador. No one to tell, or no one wanted to listen.
So
now let me ask you this, and you've probably already covered it, but just the short answer to this one. Why kill Stevens?
Because he was the guy that had imported those 20,000 rockets. Dead men tell no tales.
Is that it?
Bill Clinton is partners with Mark Rich in the arms dealing business. That was their corridor of weapons to Syria.
Chris Stevens had brought in the weapons to Libya illegally too, via Clinton.
Do we know where they got them?
Yeah, from the United States through Qatar and Turkey.
They come through Qatar and Turkey.
No, I mean, are these like, are we talking just Army weapons that were in the holding facility and then they got stolen, or what? Was this like?
No, they were delivered. They were, the U.S. authorizes weapons to be sold, and John McCain's right in the middle of that. But Bill Clinton and Mark Rich are big time
Mark Rich is
arms
the one he
dealers.
pardoned. If you remember, he was an arms dealer.
Any of these guys operate out of Texas?
Probably.
Okay, we'll leave it there.
Yeah, but the fact about Chris Stevens that was so telling was that he was dead before he ever came out. They had abused him terribly.
Everybody escaped that compound.
Yeah, everybody escaped. Oh, that was the other thing. The eyewitness said that as he was leaving the store, 2 cars full of people exited and were going away from the front of the house. 2 cars, Chris Stevens was not in those cars.
He said he would assume if there was any dignitaries there, they would have been in those cars because he saw other ones in that car. They
have ramps. They just dive in this ramp immediately. They're in the car and they're gone in seconds.
So Chris Stevens was probably dead at that point.
Yeah. And his aide de camp was dead. And here's the thing: Trey Gowdy, Louis Gohmert, all these guys that are supposedly investigating this have never talked to us. They've never talked to the eyewitnesses across the street. They've never talked to a single Libyan that was not a U.S. employee. So do you think they've been trying to get the truth? Not ever. Chew that one up.
Yeah, it just sounds like they're just closing closing all the loops.
The 2 big money gatherers for Trey Gowdy, after they heard us at one of the John Birch seminars, they said, listen, Trey Gowdy is going to want to have you all. He's going to want, we know him. He's a great guy, and we're his biggest fundraisers. And they said, we'll get your DVD to him and everything. And so a few days later, they called, well, what did Trey Gowdy have to say? He didn't talk to us. So we called him. His secretary said, yeah, we know who you are. We'll call you if we need you.
He said, we have a file on you.
And they called back a couple of times. And, of course, he's never wanted to talk to us. But, it's very, very hard for us because we've had every opportunity for us to support ourselves taken away, and we're threatened all the time. They do nasty things to us,
We're very hopeful for a new administration and
we hope we're off the kill list. We've been told by the Libyans that as late as 6 months ago that we were still on Hillary's kill list. We got a contact one time from an Al-Qaeda. They said, we know this when we were still in the Woodlands, and they said, we know your address in the Woodlands, and one day you'll see us at your front door. But, that's one threat. But the threat from our own government is the one that's really hard to fathom. And, they have taken away all of our opportunities and made it very, very difficult for us. We support ourselves with our little DVD, and we'd appreciate your audience. Go to our website. The website's free. You don't have to sign up. You get all kinds of information. There's a couple of 1,000 hours of radio interviews and information. And if they'd like to get our whole story, it's a 3-hour DVD. That will really help us a lot. But in the meantime, keep us in your prayers. Our website is
LibyanWarTheTruth.com. You want me to say it again? It's LibyanWarTheTruth.com.
No, I got it. I'll tell you, this is stunning. And I got to tell you, I'm looking for one twitch that suggests you're not on the level. I can't help it. I just do it. And you know what? I just don't see it.
Well, we have no reason. We really have no reason. As I said, we're not activists.
The truth is a hard enough taskmaster without making anything up.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah, listen, I didn't mean anything. I didn't mean that by way of an insult. I'm just saying.
I don't blame the lady the Nikki Barracall, the CIA lady who listened to us, and all the interrogators who listened to us that say, I've interrogated people in the past. You didn't miss a beat. Your story is 100% true coming from your heart. You know what you're saying is true. They all said that. And I said, well, if you sat there and watched what we watched and watched the blood run in the streets, these poor Libyan people, you would be saying the same thing.
The Libyan people know who the bad guys are. They said if the United States will just stop arming and supporting and financing Al-Qaeda Muslim Brotherhood, then we will clean our country. And then after that, we will join hands with the tribes in all the other countries and clean radical Islam from the world.
They said they joined hands with the U.S.
They formalized that in an offer that was sent to Obama. He never responded to it. we've reiterated that to Trump, so he should know that that's in play. Katrina knows us.
Yeah, the Libyan tribes came out and endorsed Donald Trump in May of last year.
Yeah.
The only Arabic tribes to ever do anything like that, I think. And they were all up the night of the election. The whole country was watching. And they were so happy when Trump was elected because they knew if Hillary Clinton was in there, their country was finished. Because she's been arming and supporting Al-Qaeda and these radical groups that are illegally occupying Libya now. And the night she was not elected and she lost, there was to be the next day an attack on Libya via Qatar. With money she had given them to
U.S. aircraft
to attack the Libyan National Army that is fighting Al-Qaeda and to do some other nasty things in Libya. There was also to be an uprising against starting in Egypt to put the Muslim Brotherhood back in there. All those things ceased and desisted the day she lost.
If you remember, there was a $1.8 billion went from the Clinton Foundation to Qatar. And they were to send $300 million to the Libyan group for arms and money payments and stuff like that. They were to receive $100 million as their fee, and $1.5 billion was to go into the Clinton coffers there in Qatar. And when she lost the election, Qatar sent word to the Libyan, the radicals there, that they would not be receiving the funding promised. So, nothing's been said about that. There's been announcements that the $1.8 billion went there, but nobody knew why. Well, that's why. And, this kind of information is golden. If a legitimate intelligence agency was trying to find out what was going on, and they would publish what we're given by the tribes every day, then there's a whole lot of information that's available. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to see it. They keep trying to sweep it under the carpet.
Would it be too much of a stretch if I were to suggest, do we think this is why CIA is so insane over Donald Trump?
Oh, yeah.
This is one big part of it.
Yeah. They have been responsible for all the false flag operations forever. It's been said many times that all wars are banker wars.
Oh, yeah.
And this is proof positive. The military-industrial complex is the United States.
Incorporated.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they make gazillions. And of course, in the war business, when you blow up stuff, you got to go pay for some more. So it's a great profit center for them. But the thing is, I think really anybody, any good God-fearing person, when they were exposed to the kind of atrocities that we saw, because we weren't supposed to be there. But when you see that, you cannot turn your back on that. This doesn't have anything to do with being brave or not. Yes, we know that we have exposed ourselves, but let me tell you, it's the right thing to do. Our country was founded and based on morals that were higher than the old oligarchs and everything operated under. And we have tremendous support from people all over the world, but God has taken us in his hands. And Joanna and I are not, we're spiritual people, but we're not thumpers or anything like that. And
you're not zealots.
How we're protected. When they planted drugs on our car, this was at a John Birch Society meeting, and we decided to have the oil changed that day. And the guy that changed the oil probably got a Christmas present, because that evening we were stopped and the car was searched for 2.5 hours, and the Texas patroller that had the phone in his ear, a flip phone, and Joanne slipped down there. Here, he says, "I'm there. That's where I'm looking."
Now
they planted drugs in our car.
Yeah, this is on Texas, because these were Texas state patrollers.
Yeah, and their names
and they followed us
ID and everything
from Lake Conroe coming up here towards Livingston. They followed us the entire time the radar detector was going off. I said, "Did they put that radar detector thing on our bumper? Because it never stopped." Then they came and stopped us. Of course, we weren't speeding, and they said they wanted to search the car. And Jimmy said, "I don't think so." He said, "You don't have any. There's no."
He said, the drug dog is going to go around your car, and if he marks drugs, then you're under arrest." The dog went around the car 15 times, didn't mark anything. The guy kept hitting the back window. Finally, the dog jumped up and hit the window. He says, "Drugs, you're under arrest." And it took them 2.5 hours. Those two patrollers, the backs of their uniform were black from crawling under the left rear corner of the van. The Toyota Sequoia's got all kinds of places you could secret things away. They didn't look any place hardly except there.
Well, I told him, I said, this is ridiculous. I said, if there's drugs in that car, you put them there. And he said, well, that's what somebody who does drugs would say.
Believe
Yeah.
me, what we've been through,
They
not
made
a
us-
chance in hell there's going to be any
They
drugs.
made us, I've never done drugs in my life.
Well, yeah, and people who go around John Birch Society meetings are notorious pot smokers, right?
There you go.
Are they?
I mean, no, hardly.
Yeah,
Now
they
listen,
know.
the John Birch Society got compromised. They were going to do a big article on us, and the reporter spent 15 hours talking to us, and they were going to do a 3-part story on us, and all of a sudden that got killed. They were going to have us travel around the country as paid speakers for them. That got killed. And when we finally dug inside to find out, they said that John Birch Society received too much pressure from the U.S. intelligence agencies. You know, we're real bad guys.
But see, we're against, we can speak out about how bad NATO is, what a criminal terrorist organization it is. And we can also speak out about the UN, and John Birch Society is against NATO and against UN. So we're great spokespersons for them, but they just dwindled away
Yeah.
Let me ask you this:
like everybody else.
when you're
They
talking
hacked our
about,
website.
sorry,
They hacked our website.
Oh, yeah.
Every now and then we'll get 40,000 hits one day, and it overloads the server, and they tell Joanne she's got to clean them out, you know.
DDoS.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something, and that is, were you talking about a 1.8? Did you say $1 billion payment?
Yes, sir.
She
Okay,
transferred it. Yeah,
So-
it was out in the public.
say that again.
It was made public. I mean, you
Okay.
could read it in the news.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this: so if this deal had gone through and the payment had been made, well, for you to make a $1.8 billion investment, you're probably looking at some real serious returns on such an investment. Can we estimate what the returns might have been in amount of dollars?
Let me back up and try to help you with where that money came from.
Okay.
Talking about Hillary's money.
Libya had cash and cash equivalents of nearly $500 billion in the Federal Reserve and in Euroclear.
Okay.
Those are Zionist organizations, and Hillary is a puppet for those guys. The banksters. This is the Rothschild, Rockefeller, Medici, Clinton, Bush, etc. Those are the bad guys that are part of the bankster organization worldwide. So that $500 billion is off the balance sheet and available to their participants. So that's probably where the money came from in the first place. They used Libya's own money to destroy it and finance whatever else they wanted to do. So that's probably where the money came from. But the return is, of course, the natural resources of Libya. And they have the highest grade oil in the world. They're Bonnie Light. You can take it out of the ground, almost pour it in your crankcase. And they were producing 3.8 million barrels of oil a day from a couple of hundred wells 20, 30 years ago. They have huge reserves that never even been touched. They have huge bauxite. They have iron ore that's 55% iron. They have a gold deposit in the southeast
They have
corner
the
that's never
world's-
been exploited.
they
They
have
have
the
pure
world's-
silicon
Yeah, they have the world's largest freshwater reservoir
under the
underneath them.
Sahara. So Libya is a very, very, very rich country. So the takeover of that country has long-term.
Besides the fact
benefit.
it's the gateway to Africa and the
Mhm.
gateway to Europe from Africa.
Just by way of a little history here, now the Italians had control of it until '69. Was that left over from World War II or what?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
Libya's
gotcha.
been occupied forever.
Until 69, Libya had been occupied almost all of its existence.
The biggest Roman city was in Libya.
Magnus,
Leptis Magna.
Leptis Magna.
Yep. Wow.
You know, there's a lot of. Joanne's a history major, and there was so much history in Libya. You could walk on. You could go inside these Roman ruins. They were pristine, not like in Greece or in Rome where they're all black from people touching them. No, it was pristine,
Yeah.
ornate mosaic floors. You know,
We had Libyans tell us that they could take us to places in the desert that they knew about, settlements of either Romans or Greeks or whoever wanted. The Ottoman Empire was there, he said, and you just, when you walk, you'll kick coins, old coins, because there's so much history, so much on the ground that nobody's ever bothered it. Nobody's ever touched it.
And do we notice how little Libya is in the news these days?
Yeah,
Yes.
they don't. It's hardly even mentioned on the atrocities. But like Joanne said, forever, Libya is really Hillary Clinton's Achilles heel. And you know what took place there is horrendous. That was their first. They touted Libya as being such a perfect operation that they were going to use that model. You remember when Obama said we're going to use this model from now on?
Because they tried to do it in Syria, but
No fly zone, and then take
unfortunately
over.
for them, Syria is a much bigger, more populated country. Libya only had 6 million people. I think
6.5
Syria
million,
has
and we have
50
killed.
million.
I'm talking about the 6.5 million legitimate Libyans. We killed 1 million of them.
Or
You're not gonna
died
see
since
that number
2011.
anyplace.
Yeah.
This is really, really something.
Well, it's terrible, is what it is.
It's war crimes beyond war crimes. You can't imagine if you let the military-industrial complex loose without a collar, without anything. This is what happened in Libya.
Well, look, we were talking with a well-known personality earlier in the program. That would be Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. And we were talking about CIA, and we were talking about this ridiculous, I guess you heard about the Russian hooker party that they were
Sure.
trying to claim Donald Trump was a part of. Yeah, I can see that happening. With
Yeah.
Melania there, Melania she is Eastern European. She will kill everyone who is involved in such a scandalous act, you know.
See what Trump said today? He said, but I'm a germaphobe. He said that would never
Wow. Well,
Paul
I mean,
Roberts is a great guy. You know, we read all of his stuff every day. He's really a tremendous guy.
well, have you ever seen such a ham-handed, sub-juvenile attempt to vilify a president who hasn't even been inaugurated yet?
No, never.
Because the Zionists, the bad guys, the cabal bankers, are in such a tizzy. You know, they know that their fiat system has gone to hell in a tea kettle. There's 188 countries don't take the U.S. dollar anymore. China is ready to go back their currency. Russia, India, Mexico, Iraq, Iran, a lot of countries have already go back their currency, and the U.S. hadn't and can't because there's no gold in this country.
Well, I
The
think
Chinese have agreed to lease sale 320,000 tons of gold to the U.S. Treasury to back up our currency, so we'll be Basel III compliant as long as the Federal Reserve is gone and all the Zionists are out.
I got to ask you a question here.
Yeah.
It's about these Zionists. So, even though this may seem like a ridiculous question, you either know or you know as little as I do about it. So I'm thinking I'm hopeful that you know more about it. Question number one is, do you have to be Jewish to be a Zionist?
No, just the opposite.
Please expand on this.
The Zionists have hijacked the Jewish religion. They are the Khazarian mafia. And they were the ones that Jesus threw out of the temples as the money traders. And the reason that they claim to be Jewish is they had been causing, they're originally from Ukraine, and they had been causing havoc all over the world, but especially to Russia for hundreds of years. And the Tsar told them, this is a couple hundred years ago or so, said, you either need to get morally correct, or else we're going to wipe you out to the last drop of your bloodline. So you go choose a religion, any of them, and practice that religion's beliefs, because you all are heathens. And so they selected the Jewish religion, but they are not Jews, and the Jews don't like them and don't want them. Everybody mistakes the Zionists as being Jews, but they are not. They are the hijackers of that, and they're Jews in name only. And they are really the Khazarian mafia. Their homeland is the Ukraine. They have no bloodline connection to the Jews.
there's a DNA study that was done, and it shows that like Netanyahu and all, they aren't related to anybody in that area of the world.
They're not
And in
related
fact-
to anybody.
Nope,
No.
no. The Palestinians are more closely related to the real Jews.
The Palestinians are related to the real Jews.
Yes, DNA wise, yes.
Can you prove this,
It's a report. It's
reports.
a big report. I can send it to you.
please?
A big study that was done.
Who did the study? Do you know right offhand?
It was done by a bunch of Jews.
It
really.
was posted on the Veterans Today network.
Mhm.
I think I don't remember who did the report, but it's a long report. I'll send it to you.
Well, I've got a lot to learn about Zionism and a lot of other things, and that's why we're here.
I'll send you the history that I have.
Sometime call me privately because I'll give you some burn down information.
Well, if we're going to throw intel around, it might as well be of the burn down variety. Otherwise, really, what's the point?
This is his personal experience.
This has personal repercussions, and I'm not willing to discuss in public.
I completely understand it. I'm going to try and figure out some sort of a secure method of getting this, although in case some of the people joining our program in progress that we're not really aware of, and yet we are because we sense them,
Yeah.
in case there are some people new to the operation, I have squirreled away a lot of information that would be very, very painful, undeniable, irrefutable, unequivocal, and otherwise ugly. That's been distributed to well over by now the better part of 100 people. I used to say about 50, but it's more than that. And none of these people know each other, and it wasn't easy to do. And in some cases, they don't know me either, but they have the information. So if somebody wants to get stupid, go ahead, give it a shot. But it's not going to work out well for them at all. Not at all. If these people think that they're embarrassed over this golden shower, bloody nonsense that they tried to push on us today, this is going to be like some sort of a card trick compared to what I got waiting for them.
Well, they're trying
you have to do it.
They're trying to cover up the Pizzagate scandals and all that. That is as bad as it gets.
Well, I didn't buy into that, brother, but I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm not. I know that pedophilia is rampant throughout the higher halls of government, or whatever you might call them, or lower morally. But and then that all got diffused when this nutcase shows up to try and take out the owner of a pizza joint.
Yeah,
I know it.
Well,
I know it. Well, I think, John, that they're uncloaking who they really are by this dumb stuff they're doing. That's who they really are.
That's what it looks like. It's just like you say, you give these idiots enough rope and they hang themselves.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, fiat currencies last a couple hundred years. This has been going on, and I think their demise is really going to be based on the total destruction of their financial system.
But it's the Babylonian debt system they've set into the world that causes all of us to live in debt, which is, without debt, the fiat system doesn't work.
Yeah, well, this digital system they want to usher in, what's that? That transcends the Babylonian system. That's all the way to the Luciferian system, I guess.
That's right.
Yeah, but see, 206 countries have signed on to the Basel Accords. And to be able to transfer money internationally on the new SIP system requires that your bank be asset-backed. And gold, silver, trees, in situ assets, etc.
Something real.
And the U.S. is not.
Something you can touch.
And there's a Basel IV behind it, which is more strenuous. So that means that all the money transfers that take place in this legitimate system, not the SWIFT system, which I'm going to call the Zionist system, requires no validation of provenance on the money. The new system, which is the Asian International Investment Bank, has a 40-layer deep validation on provenance of ownership of the money. So that means that drug dealers, nobody else, are going to be able to use that system. So there's things put in place that are hamstringing the ability of the bad guys to continue to move their money and everything. So you get rid of their currency, you get rid of their money the ability to move the money around, and that's now going to give the opportunity for the countries of the world to legitimatize their financial systems, and each country will be able to print its money up to the level that it's backed by whatever this weighted bunch of assets that are part of the standard drawing rights system. And so there's hope for the financial system to be cleared up, and it's going to be cleared up pretty quick because there is no value in the stock market anywhere in the world. The only people buying stock in the United States and in Europe are the Federal Reserve, Euroclear, and the Japanese bank. And those three entities are owned by the same guys. The 38 biggest banks in the world are all bankrupt over these derivatives. There's $1 quadrillion of phony derivative debt.
Yes.
by all the countries in the world. And when the people finally wake up to that, they will be wanting to string them up. As George Bush, the old man, said years ago, he said, if the people in the United States knew what we were really doing to them, they'd string us up. Well, it's about time.
Yeah. Well, a real interesting thing happened to us last week, or since Trump was elected, the last couple of weeks. We've been contacted by a couple different people we don't know. They identify themselves as business people who have read watched our DVD and read our transcripts and really want to know if they could do business with us.
But they did tell me how many hairs I had on my backside.
Yeah, I get you.
And they did open. The one guy said, "Well, I live up in Virginia." Well, he was real interested in Libya and rebuilding it because of this. There's going to be so much business. There's $2 trillion worth of business at least to rebuild what they blew up in that country. And it's difficult to get business in a country unless you know the people. You have to, unless you're a big company like Shell Oil or somebody who has some knowledge or recognition of who they are. So he said, you know the tribes, don't you? And I said, yes. He said, well, you'll be able to get business anywhere. I said, well, sure, we can get business in Libya. That's not a problem. We've been there and paid our dues there, literally. They want to join hands with us because we know the tribes of Libya. So coming out of the woodwork, we've got these intel organizations who want to.
They've offered to rebuild our production.
Yeah,
facility.
they want to get inside Libya and they want to use the tribes. They want to know if we would be willing to introduce them to the tribes. So I thought it was kind of interesting that they're seeing the rebuilding process already starting to happen in Libya. That means that the cleansing is going to happen of the radicals that are there.
Mm-mm-mm. Well, I got to tell you, this has been, may I just say, an extraordinary conversation. And I got a feeling we're going to need to do a chapter 2.
Be glad
I'm
to do
sure
that.
you're
We please ask your folks to go to our website. We need all the prayers and support we can get. And we're on the end of a real small limb, and the bad guys have got a big hatchet on the big
we're
end.
hoping they got the hatchet taken away because Pete Sessions got us off the no-fly list. That was great.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So it's LibyanWarTheTruth.com.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, that's in guest media right now, but that's farther along the timeline when they see the program, which they're doing now, and we're talking at this moment. Caravanners will be seeing the program later than we're speaking. So, for Pete's sake, you have our contact information. You know how to get a hold of K2. So if anything weird happens, I mean, the guy never sleeps. So reach out, will you? And I'll be in touch in a couple of days. All right.
Good. Well,
Absolutely.
we've got a lot of Libyan folks that tribal leaders and the top imam in the country, really a great guy. He was just released from prison. We'd be glad to bring him on and you can have some conversation with him to get some in-country information.
Sheikh Tantouche was imprisoned illegally for 5 years simply because he was against radical Islam and was helping his people.
Tortured, beaten, really a good man.
I'd love to talk to him. I think it'd be an extraordinarily.
Yeah, we could put him on with you. He'd just been out for 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Yeah.
Well, let's let him adjust to this side of the wall.
Yeah.
And maybe
He's
in
still healing from the
he's-
torture. that
Well,
they did.
I don't know about you, but I think the time is now to bring this pressure to bear. I didn't realize. I've spent a lot of time and a lot of years of my life in Dallas, Texas. I lived out in LA for about 5 years and then came back because Texas is Texas. I love California, I do, but it's there's some political components there that are too insane for me. I can't do it. But I digress. I didn't really realize that living in Dallas, Texas, I'm practically in Illuminati Central. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
But I got to tell you that it is very disturbing to me to learn of these things this country has done, all under the Bravo Sierra banner of keeping us safe. Well, it looks to me like the more these mugs get their way, the less safe we all are. I've been saying for years, we need to get rid of this Obama character before he gets us all killed. And Dr. Roberts, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts on earlier is like, I agree with him. The world hates us for what we do. Do you find that to be the case or not?
100%.
Absolutely. And the world knows.
Oh, they know.
They know things that you and I mean, when having grown up, I grew up in Oregon. Jimmy grew up in Texas, but you know, I didn't know a lot of things. And one of the things they told me was that John McCain is a fraud. They told me this years ago. I said, what do you mean? They said, he was never imprisoned like that. He said, all the world knows this, but except America.
There was a 2-hour documentary done on him, and the head of that camp was out speaking all over the world about what a phony John McCain was.
I've been totally sick of that guy for I don't know how many years.
Man.
Yeah, we were picking on him earlier in the show too. It's. I ask whenever I pass through Arizona, and I do sometimes. I'll just ask random people, why can't you guys get rid of John McCain? And they just look at me like, I don't know.
Because they don't count the votes. Wake up, everybody! Nobody's counted the votes in the United States in 100 years.
What?
The votes have not been counted in the United States in 100 years. The people are appointed. The voting machines, all the elections and everything are a complete sham.
I think Trump really got elected,
Yeah,
but
he did.
I don't think Hillary Clinton.
In spite of.
Yeah, she didn't win any popular vote. There was, I don't know, they said now 12 million illegal
In
votes.
Dallas and in Amarillo, there were over 10,000 notices of voting machine vote change.
Yeah,
Over
but I bet that those machines were not flipping votes from Hillary to Trump.
It's the other way around.
No.
And the coordinator for the state of Texas had instructed all the locals not to keep the paper printouts anymore.
Yeah, the receipts.
Yeah.
So how does that happen?
He got called on the carpet.
He did, but how much had already happened? You know, I mean, the things that have. I hope Trump requires a complete audit just for the reason to document that those 3 million illegals that voted in California are brought forward. The 4 million in Arizona, the dead people that voted. I mean, Nevada. The 4 million in Nevada dead people that voted, that is brought to the
4 million.
All the rest of it.
Yeah.
4 million?
In
Yes,
Nevada.
sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
4 million dead people
Yes.
in Nevada
In
Yep.
Nevada.
voted.
Yeah.
Voted.
For Hillary.
They have records in other places where the same person voted 10 times. They had busloads of people that were taken around that went from one voting place to another, and they voted over and over where no ID was required. And then busloads of Democrats, of Hillary people, that went from place to place to place to place and voted, and they were photographed, and nobody ever talked about it. That's because media like you don't have a big enough ear.
Well,
But these things are out there, and that's a travesty. That's not.
Well, you know, one of the worst leaders of this cabal is here in Texas.
Yeah.
and that would be
The old man, the old broom, the old Bush.
George H.W.,
Yeah.
The one that lives in Houston. He's one of the absolute worst.
whose dad was the Nazi banker.
Yes.
Absolutely. And go back, read Trading with the Enemy.
Yeah.
His dad was an aide de camp to Hitler, and the Trading with the Enemy book is real detailed. But you know, they're linked. Their bloodline to the Queen of England. They're cousins to the Queen. You know, you go back and look at the 18 oligarchs, the families that have been running the world forever, and
But
that's part of
he
it.
also is the one that said if they ever find out what we've been doing, well, they'll string us up. But he was head of the CIA. He was in the CIA, head of the CIA, and still runs a portion of the CIA,
Huge.
the bad portion.
And he was arrested 10 minutes after Kennedy was shot. He was running out of the school book depository. He was
Yeah,
arrested
that was
that day
just
in Dallas.
released.
Who, George H.W. Bush?
Yes, sir.
HW.
Yeah, no wonder he couldn't remember where he was.
I know.
He was arrested 10 minutes after Kennedy was shot, running out of the school book depository, and he had
Residue.
residue
GSR on
his hands.
Gunshot residue.
Yep.
Wow. Look, for Pete's sake, stay healthy out there. Remember what I said about singing out. Let us know, because
Yeah. Well,
we got some buttons we can push if it comes down to it, but we don't push them unless you only push it once.
That's right.
So, but let's have some more conversations, and I'll be in touch within the next couple of days. And I want to get some more material from you. I'd love to interview some of the people that you know. And,
Okay.
glad to do that.
you know, is this a great country or what? No. But the fact is, it's the dream of what the country is supposed to be. It's the dream that was framed in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And these, you know, I had this dog that was actually a coyote. Just looked like a little German Shepherd dog, but it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And our main dog, his name was Frank, looked at me as this little coyote is growling at him and challenging him for his food. He looks at me like, I suppose you know what you've let into the house. This thing that's growling at me right now. You've let a feral dog in with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he just went back to his dinner. He just ignored this coyote. This coyote, if you turned your back on this dog for 10 seconds, he would vanish into the neighborhood. And I don't care what you did, you would not see him for a couple of days. He would go out into the yard and you could see him go into a hypnotic trance, just sniffing like he was just getting drunk on all these new scents that his nose was picking up. And I bring this story up because I think that's what's happened to us as a people. I think we've just gotten drunk on the scents that our noses pick up, this the freedom that we think we smell, the little freedoms that we still enjoy, while all the time the big unseen guy behind the curtain is telling us, you're free, your country is great, we can do anything, we're exceptional. And I'll tell you what, I don't like living in Illuminati Central knowing that that's what it is. And I don't like the fact that some of those devils over there in the Middle East that refer to us as the great Satan may be correct.
Oh, yeah. We are the evil empire.
Well, I don't like that.
Empire. And the illusion that we still have these freedoms is simply that it's an illusion.
That's
only.
the balloon that holds us up right now. But you know, the Libyans would tell you, and you could talk to anybody in the Middle East. We talked to the Egyptian tribes too. They would tell you, we don't hate America. We love American people. It's your government that's so bad. Why do you allow that?
Mm-hmm. That's a real good question.
That same question. Why do you allow that? You know, they told us that Obama was Muslim Brotherhood in 2011, and they told us Obama.
Before that,
yeah,
they were so proud.
What they told us was Obama was going to be the first Muslim president in 2007. They told us that.
Yeah, I'm thinking there's more to him than that, too. He's a little light on his feet. For me to believe he's completely straight, I'll put it that way.
I like how he's a Muslim and can be that way.
I got to ask a question. This may be a little out of line, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What's all this about the ambassador being gay, Chris Stevens? Is that true or not?
You know, we've talked with Lydia that said she was she was engaged to him and he was a great guy and everything. The fact is that he had a real tainted reputation in Libya. Now, I don't know that he had any friends in Libya or anything like that, but you know, the problem is the bad guys, and I'm again going to talk about the Zionists, the CIA. They entrap people with drugs, sex, money, whatever.
You bet.
And once they're trapped, then they're the pawn forever. And whether that was part of it or not, I don't know. But you know, Chris Stevens was first in Libya as part of the oversight committee to see the removal of all the nuclear enhancement devices. So he was there beginning in 2006. He became ambassador sometime after that. But
he was CIA.
He was CIA forever.
Oh, you bet he was. And the thing about it is, all they have to do is say it, and it becomes part of his legend.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, whether that's true or not, I don't know. We personally never met the guy.
Understood and appreciated. And
we heard all kinds of information both ways. Lydia, she has a completely different story, but they never married. They separated, you know.
It was the State Department that put out that he was gay, and they were so proud that there was a gay ambassador in Libya, a Muslim country.
Yeah. Why would they put something like that out to begin with, unless they were setting him up for a brutal murder later?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I get it.
You have to question everything they put out.
But you know, you have to. There are also some things that are just not done in the Muslim society. Like a man does not hold the hand of a woman that's not his wife in public.
Right.
The current ambassador.
No, she's not.
No, the past ambassador, Deborah
Jones. She's gone now.
She was filmed many times holding hands with the radical imams in Libya, and they're grinning. They're like a raccoon eating shit through a picket fence, and she's holding hands with them. They're both grinning. That's a sign that he is having personal relations with that woman.
Well, the
These
Libyans were
kinds,
shocked.
they were shocked.
They
These
sent
kinds
us
of
the
things.
picture. They said they thought everybody'd be shocked by this. I said, well, in America, we probably wouldn't think much of that. And he said, well, in a Muslim country, we think
That's
a
the
whole
worst.
lot of that. So,
So,
they-
is that intentional, or is the State Department that ignorant, or they don't care? What is it? There's too many questions. Our government is for all practical purposes, Washington, D.C. is illegitimate, period.
they've all become demigods, and I hope that we're seeing a big change, and I hope that change can survive. That's what I really hope.
Well, let's just keep pushing for it because we got nothing better to do we? Other than save
That's
the
right.
nation.
That's
I'm
right.
thinking saving the nation might be job one.
Yes, I think so. That might be it.
But you're pushing a piece of string uphill because you've got everybody in D.C. that's going to be working against the interests of the people.
Well, hopefully some of those people are at the end of the people mover, like John
Yeah.
McCain is going to fall off any
That's
day.
right.
Well, it seems like the more rope. I've said this already today once, but I'm not hesitant to say it again. That's how it is. You give these rats enough rope and watch them hang themselves. But after they do, it's up to us to gather the crowd for the hanging so we can observe this.
That's right.
And
That's exactly
and everybody sees the same thing. Well, God bless you both, and thanks for coming on and spending this time with us. I really
Thanks.
appreciate
We
it.
enjoyed it.
We
Give us
enjoyed
a
it.
shout.
All right,
Thank you so much.
we'll be in touch. God bless. Bye bye. Well, I would say that's a sufficient amount to attempt to digest for one episode of Caravan to Midnight. I repeat, thank you very much for supporting us. We could not do this without you. Without you, no one who would want to talk to us without you. Nobody. Fingers are pretty strong, but altogether, they're stronger. So commit. Commit to engage when you are called upon your hour. And between now and then, may the Lord protect you. May He enable you to sharpen your critical thinking skills. May you be ever mindful to keep your eyes up always. This is going to be a very tricky, complicated, and dangerous year. I'm not kidding you either. Together we make ready for what's to come. That's what we do, isn't it? Be seeing you.